Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Worton. This podcast has evolved over the 5+ years since it first launched. From now on, I'm going to be talking about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. And also mindset, of course, but mindset of all kinds, not just business mindset. I think. Things are changing for me, as you may have noticed if you've been following me online or listening to this podcast, so anything goes here. I hope you stay along for the ride. Thank you so much for joining us today, and now let's get into this week's episode. Hello, and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 293. This is your host, Holly Worton, and I'm back with another solo episode. So I have a few suggested topics from listeners in the pipeline, and this one came into my inbox last December. So I have decided to talk about that this week because it's been something that's been on my mind ever since I received the email, and I think it's a really interesting concept to explore because it's something that I really resonate with, and I think I've found it a challenge in the past as well. So the email from Claire goes as follows. I've been listening to your podcast lately. It amuses me that there are some that I think, yeah, I've got that bit nailed. These are usually the ones about having fun and plenty of downtime. Then you have the podcasts on things like success. The day I listened to that one, I had sent my husband an email at lunchtime telling him that I had had a successful morning due to achieving 3 goals, including one that I'd been working on for weeks in Pokemon Go. And I realized that maybe after the illness, the need to relax and have downtime and fun got so embedded into my belief system that I have difficulties in allowing myself to focus and work hard to achieve something. So I totally know where she's coming from. For the last 9 years of my life, probably, I have had issues with my thyroid, and it's been an underactive thyroid. So not only did I gain a bunch of weight, but my energy levels went raw. So I found that life was just really difficult. I was really struggling to get things done. I was really struggling to do the things that I wanted to do, especially physical things. I was sleeping more. If I pushed myself more physically, that meant that I needed to sleep even more. I just got used to being really, really precious about taking care of myself. This, coupled with the fact that I became really careful about taking care of myself after I left my first company, which I ran for 10 years with a workaholic business partner and was constantly cycling between burnout and gearing up to burnout. So when I took my sabbatical after I left that company, I really started to practice self-care and just be really gentle with myself and be aware of my energy levels and take care of myself, which is something that I hadn't done for the previous 10 years. And that, coupled with the thyroid issue, which started about that time, just made me really, really cautious and aware of what I was doing so that I didn't do too much and burn myself out. I pretty much made a promise to myself after I left my first company that I would never, or try to never, get burned out ever again, and that I would be really, really cautious with how I treated myself so that I would avoid kind of overachievement and working too hard and getting burnt out, because that's just not fun and it's really hard to recover from sometimes. So I got into that mindset of I'm going to take care of myself, I'm going to practice self-care, I'm going to be really mindful of how I spend my time and what my stress levels are like so that I don't do too much and get burnt out. But then I started fasting last year. Around September time, I started intermittent fasting, and I not only started losing weight, but my energy levels just went through the roof in the beginning. In the beginning, I had a bit too much energy. I was kind of bouncing off the walls. And then I eventually mellowed out to a really great level of energy where I feel like a normal human being again. So I've got energy. My sleep improved. Fasting completely changed my life in so many levels. And I talk about this all the time, so if you've heard me go on and on about fasting in person, I'm sorry. I should probably do a podcast episode on this in case people are interested in learning more about fasting. But in the meantime, I have a blog post that I wrote about my journey to losing weight and getting energy through fasting. And you can find that at hollyworton.com/weight, as in how much I weigh, WEIGHT, not wait a minute. So fasting changed everything for me. It got me the energy levels that I wanted, my sleep improved, everything was just feeling great. And the low energy levels were something that I had worked on in the past with many, 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 many different practitioners. And I've also done a lot of work on it myself, mindset stuff. So when I got back to that level where I no longer felt restricted by my energy levels and I felt like I could do most of the things that I wanted to do, it kind of took my mindset a while to catch up with that. It took my awareness of reality a while to catch up to that. So I started noticing stuff like I'd be, hiking up a hill and I would stop a third of the way up or a quarter of the way up or whatever, depending on how high and how long the hill was. Then I would realize, I'm stopping because I need a rest, except I don't need a rest, so I should just keep going. And then I'd kind of pick up my pace again and I'd start walking. And this happened so many times that I realized I had gotten into the habit of stopping several times while going up a hill, that I was doing it automatically without actually checking into my energy levels and seeing if I needed a rest or if I could just keep going up to the top of the hill. And that was a very interesting kind of discovery for me because I realized that, it just become automatic to take a rest. And obviously, it's fine to rest if you're going up a hill, take a rest whenever you want. But the awareness for me was realizing that this had become an automatic thing where I stop and rest once or more times going up a hill without actually realizing whether I needed it. And the reality was I didn't need it anymore. Then I started realizing that, like with my kickboxing, when I first started, I was going 4 days a week. I was really into it. But then I realized I was exhausted all the time. And I realized that the days that I went to kickboxing class, the next morning, it was hard for me to get up in the morning and I'd have to sleep in a little bit to recover. And so I eventually dropped down to going to class just 2 days a week. But not even class 2 days a week, because I started doing one-to-one classes with my trainer. So I was doing one group class and then one private class, and that was it. And, I kept progressing through my belts and doing my gradings and being aware that I really should have been going to class more often, especially considering that I'm at the advanced grades now and I should be putting in more kind of training time. But I just didn't have the energy. And then I got the energy, but it was like I didn't realize that I could now step up my training and do the things I wanted to do and do more training because I now had the energy. So this year I've started going 3 days a week, so once my private class and then 2 times group class, but I really want to step it up to 4 days a week like I did in the beginning, so 3 group classes, 1 private class. And I haven't kind of been able to fit that into my schedule yet, but I have noticed that there are some days where I've got it in my calendar to go and I feel kind of lazy because it's the evening and I don't really feel like going. And before, when my energy levels were low, that was the time of the day when I would kind of check in and I would think, okay, do I have the energy to go or do I not? And oftentimes the answer would be no. Now the answer is pretty much yes. So whether or not I go to class, it depended on me getting my butt up off my desk chair, closing my computer screen, folding it down, getting up, getting changed, getting my stuff together, and going to class. So I need to reprogram my brain and start taking the actions I need to take to get to class more often, in the same way that I become aware of the fact that I don't need to stop going up the hill and I can just keep going. So it's learning how to reprogram my brain, not just by doing mindset work, but by becoming aware of my actions and how I feel and whether or not I actually can get up and do the things that I want to do, that I've been complaining for the last few years that I didn't have the energy to do, and now I do have the energy. So I hope this all makes sense. So in the same way that I'm rediscovering that I could be don't want to say pushing myself more, but making the effort to do the things that I want to do because I can do them and it won't drive me to burnout. In the same way that I'm experiencing this, there may be things that you want to do or that you could kind of step up the rhythm on or do more stuff to get more stuff done to achieve more of the goals that you have. So that's what this episode is about. And there are a few other episodes that I want to mention today and kind of call attention to. So first of all, in Claire's email, the episode on success that she mentioned was episode 278 that I did with Joanna Hennon, which was called Success, It's More Than Just Money. And in that episode, we talked about all the different little areas in life that you can celebrate your success in, because oftentimes we focus our success on just how much money we're bringing in and not the other things. So for example, my success with my energy levels and my weight loss and my sleep due to fasting is something that I have celebrated. I very consciously celebrated because it has been so massively life-changing for me. So stuff like that, big, small, whatever, it's important to celebrate these successes and to base our life success on more stuff than just money. So, how to know when you're doing enough? I think that's kind of the root of this issue. And what the heck does enough mean? And of course, that's going to depend on everyone, whether or not you're doing all the things that you want to do, all the things that you could do. So how do you figure out when you're doing enough or if you could do more? Because you're feeling better, you've got more energy, and you could be doing more than you have been for the last X amount of time because you weren't feeling well. So I think the important thing is to look at, what do you want to be doing? So, what are your goals? What things would make you happy? What things would you like to achieve? Now, I did an episode kind of vaguely related to this last year. It was episode 252, and that was also based on a listener request, and it's about how to commit to something, follow through, and make it happen. So that episode may answer some of your questions on the how-to of this, because I talked about things that I committed to during the year and what specific things that I've done to follow through. And I talk about what kinds of things have worked for me and what kinds of things haven't worked for me. Talk about how to make a commitment to yourself in business or life, why you need to make sure you really, really want this thing that you have set as a goal, how to create a plan and get organized so that you can actually take the actions to achieve the goal. I talk about time blocking, which is my kind of magic tool. I'm going to talk about that again today because I will never tire of time blocking and recommending it. I also talk about how to get clear on the things that might get in the way of you actually following through and taking the actions. Talk about how to take inspired action so that you can keep your commitment and where to get accountability if you think you need it. So those are kinds of the how-tos of committing to something, following through, and making it happen. But how do you know what things to commit to? I became very aware when I did that episode, 252, that all of the things that I was using as examples were personal life stuff. So I remember I talked about my kickboxing stuff. I talked about my Walk 1,000 Mile challenge. I talked about my books that I had written. I talked about doing my workation weekends. I talked about doing a Couch to 5K program to get in shape for my kickboxing gradings. I talked about my Druid Bardic training, Bardic grade course. And I realized that all that stuff, except for my books, was very much kind of personal goals and not business goals. And that I hadn't included any business goals or money goals or anything like that. And later, I realized that was because all that stuff was more important to me than achieving my business goals. And that was kind of one of the things that probably led to me letting go of my business. Now, if you're in my Patreon, you probably know that I still am doing occasional mindset work because I love that work. I love helping people, but I'm no longer really focused on that as a business. I'm choosing to focus more on my writing and my books, and specifically working on my tree book, which will be coming out in April. So I think the important thing is, first of all, identifying your priorities. Like, what do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? And make sure that you really, really, really want it and that it's a priority for you, because it's not a priority for you and it's not something that you really, really want to do. You just think it's something that you should do. It's going to make it a lot harder to achieve it. So think about the goals that you have for your life, whether it's business goals, professional goals, work goals, personal goals, fitness goals, mindset goals, inner work goals, personal development goals, spiritual goals, I don't know, all that kind of stuff. Think about all the stuff that you want to achieve in all those areas of your life, and think about what are the most important ones. And then think about what's one more thing you could do, and maybe pick 3 top goals. So maybe pick the 3 most important goals in any area of your life. It could be 3 personal goals. It could be 1 goal from each category, whatever. Pick 3 that are the absolute most important ones for you. And actually sit down and write them out and prioritize them. I find that it's really useful to write this stuff out and help get my priorities clear by seeing the stuff and then assigning numbers to prioritize. So pick the top 3. And then for each of those top 3, pick one thing you could do, one action you could take to get closer to achieving your goal, each of those 3 goals. Add it to your calendar, time block it so that you got the time in your calendar to do it, and do it. And then see how that goes. Was it really hard to fit those 3 things into your calendar? If so, dial it back and maybe pick one of those things to do each week for 3 weeks. Or if you've got a really crazy schedule, I don't know, one of those things per month. Figure out how you can add a little bit more, and that will help you see if you're doing enough or all the things that you can do to achieve your goals. If that's too much, if that's overwhelming, pick one goal and one thing you could do to achieve that goal. Add it to your calendar, do it, and then add a second thing. Add another thing you could do to achieve that goal, and keep doing until you achieve that goal, and see how that works. See if you can kind of step up the rhythm a little more, get more stuff done, get stuff done faster, focus more on your goals, and see how that works for you in terms of doing more, taking more actions to achieve your goals. So I think that's one thing that can help you understand if you're doing enough or if you could do more. So the next topic I wanted to talk about was how to know if you could do more, but that was kind of the flip side of how to know if you're doing enough, because this is really a balance. You don't want to push and push and push yourself and hustle, 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 and end up burning out and not being able to do anything, because now you've got to focus on self-care and, get yourself back on track. So do a little bit more, see how it goes, and really become aware of how this works for you. Is it too much? Dial it back and do a little bit less. But play around with it and try to find what's your kind of limit. How much more can you handle? And how much more can you... I'm aware of my language as I say this. And it's not how much more can you handle? Add more and more and more to your schedule. It's how much can you take and still feel like you're in balance? We're trying to do this kind of gently while still getting things done. I don't like hustle. If you've ever listened to this podcast before, I don't like push, push, push. That doesn't work for me. So assuming it doesn't work for you, push yourself a little bit, do one little thing, take one little, bit more of action and see how that works. And then just pace yourself and see whether you need to step up your pace, slow down your pace. And the only way to do this is really by experimenting and by being aware of how you feel as you do this experimenting. So, make a list of some of the things that you've accomplished in recent years that make you really, really happy and proud of yourself and that have added joy to your life. And think about what are some other things that you want to accomplish. Write all this stuff down so you don't lose it. Write it down in a journal, write it down, on your computer in Evernote or something, somewhere where you won't lose it. And pick one thing and play around with it. Now, I think one thing that's really important here is to not compare yourself to other people, which is something that I've really struggled with in life. So last year, I also did an episode on comparison. It was episode 239, and I talked about how to quit the comparison game for good. And that episode, I think, is something that I personally need to go back and listen to again and do the mindset work so that I can let go of the comparison game for good. Because one of the things that I talked about in that episode was a 3-step process to help you quit the comparison game for good. I talk about how to understand what your particular brand or flavor of comparison game does and how it works. Talk about things you can journal on to get clarity on what your comparison game looks like, how to get a higher perspective on your comparison game and the people that you might be putting on a pedestal. Talk about why you don't have all the other information on what someone else's game really looks like, and how to take both inner and outer action to quit the comparison game for good. So, again, I think this comparison game stuff, and I know I was kind of bold when I titled that episode on how to quit the comparison game for good, because like I said, I haven't achieved that yet. Thought I hadn't. So I think the comparison game is a lot like other mindset stuff, where it's like that spiral staircase, which I keep talking about. You keep going up to new levels and kind of hitting a new ceiling, and then taking action, going up another level, hitting that ceiling. And by taking that action, that combination of mindset work plus practical action, you keep going up that staircase, hitting new ceilings, being confronted with that block again, and then taking more action to get through that block and get up to the next level. So the way I see it is quitting the comparison game for good is simply doing the work, getting up to that new level, doing more work, getting up to the new level. And I clearly have some more work on that to get up to the next level, because I recently had an experience where I was ridiculously aware of me comparing myself to other people. So I recently did this combo ceremony, which is a frog medicine ceremony. And I will link to that in the show notes. And if you are interested in combo, I can send you the details of the person that I did the ceremony with. Combo is a kind of shamanic, spiritual healing method using the secretions of this South American frog. It is perfectly legal, and it is available all over the world, except for Brazil, which is, I think, the only country where it's illegal, which is, interestingly, the country where the frog comes from. So anyway, doing this frog medicine ceremony with this lovely group of people, most of whom I knew. It was just a lovely, supportive environment of people who were like really into healing. And like I said, I knew a lot of these people. So combo is one of those spirit medicines where you go through a purging process. So when you go to a combo ceremony and you settle in, you're going to see that you've been given a big bucket, and the bucket is for you to be sick in. You might want to forward this podcast a couple of minutes if you have any issues hearing about sickness, vomiting, that kind of thing. So anyway, you are given the combo, and then you immediately start purging. So most people vomit. So you're vomiting in the bucket, you're doing your thing. You spend about 20 to 30 minutes of vomiting. And the idea is to vomit all the water that you have recently consumed, because you have to drink about 2 liters of water before you start this. So vomit until you've emptied your stomach and bile comes out. So I'm not massively fond of being sick. I find it really difficult to vomit. But for some reason, this went really easily. Not easily in the sense that I felt fantastic, because I felt like crap. The whole time I was going through the purging, I was thinking, why did I do this? Why did I sign up for this? I'm never doing it again. But I was doing my thing. And then I finished. And then I kind of went into my rest period. And then later on at the end of the day, we all kind of grabbed our buckets and went out to the garden, the grounds of the place that we were doing this ceremony, to kind of give our sick back to the earth and, thank the spirits of the land for supporting us in this. And grossness warning ahead. It was impossible to not see other people's buckets and their stuff in it. And I realized that I hadn't been produced as much sick as some other people, and some other people had more bile than I did. And I was thinking, oh my God, I didn't do enough. I should have done more. I should have asked for a 3rd dot so that I could keep vomiting and oh my God, these people have puked more than I have. And do you hear what I'm saying? Like, I was thinking that I wasn't good enough because I hadn't been as sick as some other people. This reminds me of that blog post that I did a couple of years ago about how my celery wasn't good enough, which I will link to that in the show notes because that's another ridiculous story about me thinking I'm not good enough because my celery wasn't organic or some shit. So listen to how ridiculous I am. Like, my vomit was not good enough. Other people's vomit was better because they had more bile. Like, first of all, gross. I'm sorry I'm sharing this story with you, and I'm sorry if that's TMI. But I wanted to share it with you because it's such a ridiculous example of how we can compare ourselves to others and try to reinforce this shitty limiting belief that some of us have that we're not good enough. So be aware always that you are comparing yourself to yourself and to your own standards of what you want to achieve and that you're not comparing yourself to anyone else. So the next question is, when you've been through an experience like this, how do you get back on track? How do you focus better? How do you get shit done? Good question. I find that, again, getting your priorities straight, getting your priorities clear is the absolute first step. You need to know what's important to you and what do you want to focus on and what do you want to commit to so that you can achieve it. And that requires, as I said earlier, being really, really honest with yourself. Are these goals that are really going to make you happy and bring joy to your life, or are they goals that you think you should be achieving because someone else is doing the same thing or has already achieved it, so you feel like you need to catch up to them? Don't try to catch up to other people. Do your own thing, because that's what's going to bring joy to your life. I also find that when I get off, and I know I've said this in recent episodes, but gratitude work really helps me to kind of get centered. So when I'm feeling crappy, when I'm feeling like I'm comparing myself to others, when I'm feeling like just things aren't going well, doing gratitude work can really get me back kind of centered and in a good mind space. So you might also think about doing gratitude work like for yourself. Like, I'm so happy and grateful that I was able to achieve whatever goal, my walk 1,000 miles goal. That can be really, really useful. So be sure that you are in gratitude with yourself for the things that you have already achieved, because that can help you kind of get centered and come from a good place to be planning the stuff that you're going to be achieving. So how to focus better and get stuff done. Oh, this is also reminding me of this ancient blog post that I wrote. I think it was back in 2011. And it was basically how to focus and get stuff done. So I will link to that in the show notes. That was actually a 2-part, I think, blog post that went viral and got so many views. It was so exciting. So I'll link to those in the show notes. It's a really, really old post. So I went to get the link for this blog post to put it in the show notes. And the blog post is called 10 Easy Steps to Improve Time Management and Reduce Stress. And this blog post has had thousands and thousands of views. And I wanted to kind of make an aside here to say, I was making notes today on things I wanted to talk about in this episode about how to get things done and how to focus better and how to work smarter and not harder. And I realized that a lot of the things that I had written down were very much in alignment of stuff from this blog post. So there's 2 blog posts, and I will link to them in the show notes. But very quickly, let me just run through some of these because this is a great blog post. I totally work by these guidelines, and I'm just really happy with this blog post. I wrote it in January of 2011, and 8 years onward, it's fantastic. So start out with setting goals, which we've already talked about, and then planning, plan your strategy. Break your big goals down into tasks. And if you've got big tasks, break them down into smaller tasks. That is the only way I get shit done. I tend to get overwhelmed sometimes by really big goals and projects and things. So the very first thing I do is, what do I need to do? What does this goal entail? When I'm writing a book, what does that book involve? It's not just writing the book, it's writing the book, editing the book, getting someone else to edit the book. It's formatting the book, formatting the ebook, getting a cover design, so much stuff. But it's easy when you have it all broken down into little tasks. So plan, be strategic. Don't get distracted by bright, shiny objects. Plan a strategy and take actions. Now, how often you take the actions or how many of those actions you fit into a day or a week depends on what you can handle. But you gotta have the plan so that you can stay on track to achieve the goals. Next, prioritize. So as I said earlier, you've got to pick the goals that are most important to you and start with those. Next is setting deadlines, especially when you've got a project like a book, for example. You've got to set deadlines. If I don't give myself deadlines, I don't get shit done. I don't do anything. It drags on. So now I've got a deadline for my book. I just had a call with my book launch coach last week, and I realized that I have less time than I thought I had. So we're launching the book on April 23rd, but she's got to have the files from me by April 2nd to do her stuff, which means that backtracking from there, I've got to get my final draft done, get the file back from the editor, go through the editor's comments, do my ebook formatting, get that done, get the typesetting done. I have so much stuff I need to do before April 2nd. So I have had to get clear on exactly what those things are and then time block them into my calendar. Now, time blocking is the only way I get stuff done. So if I look at my calendar, I've got certain recurring tasks like waking up, kind of tidying up downstairs, and kind of my first half hour of the day, my brain does not function. So I kind of wash any dishes that need washed, tidy up the kitchen, that kind of thing. And that's my first half hour of the day because that's kind of the time that it takes me to start functioning properly. Then I've got a very extensive morning routine where I do my druid stuff and I'm reading and journaling and that kind of thing. And then 11 o'clock, usually I start my workday. So I've got stuff time blocked in my calendar, like emails, writing, sending out any invoices that I need to send out, working on promoting my podcast episodes. So every time an episode comes out on Monday, I spend some time putting it online, that kind of thing. I have time to record my podcast episode, which is what I'm doing right now, Patreon, other stuff. So what's important when you time block is to be aware of how long it actually takes you to do a thing. So, for example, I was talking with a friend once who has a podcast, and she was saying how she's struggling to do a podcast episode or fit into her schedule or get it done or something. And she said, well, how much time do you block out in your schedule for doing a podcast? And I said, well, every time I do a solo episode, I block out 2 hours in my calendar. And she was like, what? It's a half an hour episode. And I said, yes, but it's not just recording the episode. I spend at least a half an hour or so making notes and bullet points on what I'm going to say. Like, I don't just show up to the microphone and just blab for a half an hour or more. I plan what I'm going to say because I know your time is valuable and I don't want to just blabber about stuff for a half an hour and waste your time. So I try to keep it to the point. If I have, personal stories and personal examples that I want to share, those go in the bullet points. Talk about the stuff that you're going to learn from the episode, that goes in the bullet points. If I know that I'm going to reference any other podcast episodes that are kind of related to this topic, that goes in the bullet points. Like, I plan all this stuff out, and that takes me at least a half an hour. Then the episode takes, between a half an hour to an hour. Right now, as I say this, I'm at 36 minutes, so I've already gone over half an hour. Plus, I've got to do the show notes and the graphics and send all that stuff to my podcast guy so that he can get it set up. So it's really about 2 hours. So sometimes more, sometimes less, but about 2 hours. So you've got to be honest with yourself about how much time you need to time block for. A half an hour podcast episode is not a half an hour in my calendar, in my life. It's 2 hours. So be honest and time block based on how long it takes you to do stuff. Now, when I do an action, like take an action to work on a project, and it takes longer than I expected or shorter than I expected, I update that in my calendar so that if that's a recurring task, something that I'm going to do again, maybe not every week or every day, but maybe next month, I can look back and say, how long did that take me to do that thing? Okay, it took me 3 hours. That was longer than I thought, so I'm going to have to time block another 3 hours to do it again. Now, next time I do it, it might take less or more time, but the important thing is I have an estimate based on how long it took me the last time to do it. So it's really important to keep things kind of updated in your calendar. So time blocking, and if you don't know what time blocking is, please email me, ask me what that means, what that looks like, and I give you some examples, or you can Google it, and I'm sure Google has lots of stuff on time blocking. Also, Amber de la Garza, who has been a guest on this podcast before, has talked a lot about time blocking on her blog and her podcast, so I will link to something from Amber's in the show notes because she is a time blocking genius. I also find that the days that I do my morning routine, which is pretty much every day, I am so much more efficient because I've started out with my mind in the right place. The days that I skip my morning routine because something happens or I have an early call or, whatever, I am much less efficient because my mind is not in the right place. It's like I've started out on the wrong foot and the rest of the day is just not as efficient as it might have otherwise been. Next, focus on just one thing. Don't try to multitask. Try to lump tasks together. So I have a big chunk of time every day to work on emails. And that's not just emails, it's the tasks related to the emails. But I don't check emails throughout the day. I have a big chunk where I do emails, and then after that, if an email comes in, it's sitting there until tomorrow. Unless if I have extra time left over at the end of the day, I might go back to my emails and check them again. But pretty much, it's just that once. So that's really, really helpful. I find it just crazy to kind of go back and forth and dip in and out of my email inbox throughout the day. That does not work for me. And I think it does not work for most people. So focus on one thing and do it. And I also find that this time blocking thing really helps me to just focus on one thing. Because if I don't have my day time blocked, sometimes I don't, sometimes I haven't planned my day properly, that day is just totally inefficient and I don't get very much done. So time blocking also helps me to stay on track because I can see when my times are for doing specific activities. I can see when my times are for a break, and I can get stuff done when I'm supposed to. So plan your days, but also plan your weeks. So at the start of each week, sometimes on a Sunday, usually on the Monday morning, I go through my calendar for the week. I look at what I've got on my plate. I adjust my time blocks if I need to, and look at the tasks I have, see if I can reasonably get stuff done, and then I bump the stuff off to a following week if I really don't have time to do it this week, or if one day everything seems to take longer than I thought and some tasks can't get done, I just bump it to a later day or a later week. So plan your weeks. Really, I cannot stress enough using an online calendar to plan your weeks because you can drag and drop, change the dates on stuff, and it's so much more flexible than using a paper calendar or a printed calendar or a written calendar. You can just drag, drop, and adjust as needed. I love Google Calendar. I love it so much, and I'm so grateful for that tool. So when you're going through stuff like emails and tasks, you need to prioritize, what's the most important stuff to get done. So I use an app called Boomerang, and I think it's called Boomerang for Gmail. I will link to that in the show notes. And Boomerang, I could not live without Boomerang because when I'm looking through my inbox, last week was not a very productive week for me because my cat was unwell. She was in the hospital. I was a nervous wreck. I was not getting stuff done. I was doing the most important stuff, but a lot of stuff just kind of went wonky because I could not concentrate because I was so worried about her. Because I am a helicopter cat mom, as one of my friends called me once. So, worried about the cat, not focusing. That means that when I showed up to my inbox this morning, I had 59 emails. So I ended up having to prioritize what are the most important emails, what are the ones that aren't so important. What I did with the ones that weren't so important was I boomeranged them out of my email inbox to come back at a later date, whether that was later today, tomorrow, whatever. I also knew that I had a meeting planned with my husband because we do some business and work stuff together for 6 o'clock this evening. So I took all the emails that were related to stuff that I needed to talk to him about in the meeting, and I boomeranged those to go out of my inbox and come back at 6 p.m. So when I show up for my meeting at 6 p.m., I'm going to have all this stuff coming back in my inbox. But in the meantime, it's out of my inbox where I don't have to look at it. Boomerang is so amazing. So again, I'm linking to that in the show notes. Boomerang just helps me prioritize, get the stuff out of my inbox that I don't need to prioritize so that I can only see the stuff that I need to prioritize. So doing that, I ended up working my way through my inbox, and I ended up working through all emails except for about 10. And stuff comes back into the inbox later, and I will deal with that when I have time, which might not be until tomorrow. So prioritize your emails, prioritize your tasks. Maybe choose 3 most important tasks or most important actions and do those every day. That is something that I used to do all the time. I would pick 3 of my most important actions and get those done. So that's something that might work for you. Also, find out when you work best. So my brain does not work well in the morning. That's why I don't start working until 11. My brain works really well as the day goes on, and my brain works really, really well in the evening. So about 6, 7, 8. Unfortunately, that's about the time that I have kickboxing at 7:45. So the days that I do that, I can't work in the evenings, but my brain works really, really well in the evenings, and I just hyper-focus and get stuff done. So that's kind of unconventional working times. Your brain might work really well between 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 or whatever, but you need to figure out when you work best and tailor your workday to those hours. I am so much more efficient now that I spend my mornings doing my inner work and my morning routine, and I work during the hours of the day that my brain actually functions and I can get stuff done more efficiently. Next, figure out how you waste time. So, I sometimes waste time by playing games on my phone. My family got me into Words with Friends, which is like a phone Scrabble, last year, and I started using that as a kind of palate cleanser for my brain when I was switching in between tasks. So say I would finish my block of emails and then I would switch to promoting my podcast episode. I would take about, 5 minutes or so, and I would play Words with Friends to kind of clear my brain and do something differently before I switched to another task. Well, that worked really well for a while, and it still works well sometimes. But there was one week where I was spending too much time on it, and I was playing too much. So I ended up using the function that you've got on an iPhone, and I'm sure Android does this as well, where you can limit your time on certain apps. So I limited my time on Words with Friends to a half an hour a day, and that's not like one half an hour block, it's a half an hour of total time in a day. Another thing that I did to make sure that I spent my morning routines doing the stuff that I want to do, which is the inner work and not messing around on my phone, is I limited my phone time between the hours of 7 p.m. and 11 a.m. So you can override that. So if you need to use some of the apps for any reason during that downtime, you can override it. But what I love about that is that it kind of fades out all of your apps that you've chosen to block for that time so that I'm reminded. Like if I pick up my phone kind of absentmindedly and I think, I'm going to browse Reddit for a while. If it's faded, that means that this is not my official Reddit browsing time and I need to put my phone down and do something else. And I did this because sometimes in my morning routine, I would just start the day off wrong and I would get distracted with stuff and I would not spend my morning routine doing the things that I want to be doing in my morning routine. So block the stuff that distracts you. Like figure out how you waste your time and find out how to block it or avoid it. Next, get enough sleep. If you have not rested well, then maybe the most efficient use of your time is sleeping in, if you can. I mean, if you have kids, you probably won't be able to, but if you don't, or if you have someone that can take care of them, or if your life is set up in a way in which you can be flexible with your mornings, get enough sleep. Get an extra hour of sleep if you need to. And that might be the most efficient thing that you can do because that will help you get stuff done later on in the day when you finally get up and get out of bed. So do not undervalue the importance of sleep. So next thing I want to talk about was working smarter or working harder, because a lot of people kind of tend to say, oh, I need to be working harder. And I think what we actually need to be doing is working smarter. So what is the difference? The difference is all the stuff that I just mentioned. The difference is time management, employing time management techniques so that you can work more efficiently on the most important stuff and not just kind of wasting your time or focusing on less important stuff. So work smarter. And try adding a little bit more to your schedule to see if you can do a little bit more so that you can achieve your goals. How to achieve your goals? Go back to that episode 252, how to commit to something, follow through and make it happen. I think it's a great companion to this episode. And again, don't compare yourself to other people. Don't compare the stuff that you've achieved to what other people have achieved. If this is a problem for you, go back and listen to episode 239, How to Quit the Comparison Game for Good. If you have done that work and you feel like you've hit another ceiling in the comparison game and you are comparing your sick to other people's sick, as I did, do the mindset work and take the actions you need to take to clear that and kind of let go of that comparison stuff and move up on the comparison game ladder. If that story was too much information for you, I apologize. If you are interested in Combo, again, I will link to that in the show notes. If you want information about the guy that I did it with, I will also link to that in the show notes. I know he's doing another date in June with the same group of people that I did it with at the same healing center that I did it at. And yeah, I will let you know once I have that date. I do not yet have it, but I will be doing it again. So despite the fact that I said never again, I look forward to doing it again. It is definitely something that I want to do again in life. So I hope you found this episode interesting and useful. I did not think I had this much to say on this topic. Sometimes I surprise myself. I've got the bullet points and then I end up having a lot to say on them. So as always, if you have any topics, anything that you want me to talk about, please drop me a line and let me know. You can email me at holly@hollyworton.com or find me online. I have another episode topic that someone gave to me via Facebook, so feel free to Facebook me, whatever. I'm out online, get in touch, send me the topic, because I find that my favorite topics to cover are always the ones that people have sent me in rather than the stuff that I've come up with on my own. You guys seem to be really good at coming up with topics for me that I know how to talk about. And if I don't know how to talk about them, or if I don't feel like I can do the topic justice on my own, I will bring someone in to have the conversation with me. So again, it's topics. I like them. Send them to me. Thank you so much for listening. If you would like to join me on Patreon, I would love to see you there. So if you head over to patreon.com/Holly Worton, you can join me there. Membership starts at just $1 a month, and you will get exclusive access to content and discounted sessions with me and done-for-you mindset work that I don't offer anywhere else. So patreon.com/Holly Worton, and you can get access to that stuff. Finally, thank you so much for listening. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I have been doing this episode for almost 6 years because people are listening. If no one listened, I wouldn't be doing this. So thank you for listening. Next week's episode should be an episode with Joe Casey. We haven't yet recorded it, so I am hoping that that will be in the calendar. If not, it will be something else. Probably another solo episode with me based on one of the fantastic topics that people have sent me in. So I mentioned tons of stuff in this episode. So if you visit hollyworton.com/293, you can find the show notes for this episode, including links to all the stuff that I have mentioned. And in a week or two, the transcript will be ready and you can read that. I know some people find it really useful to read the transcript. I'm so much more of a reader than a listener, which makes it baffling to me that I've been doing this podcast for so long. So if you like transcripts, you can get that. Thank you, thank you, thank you for listening. I am signing off now. You have a fantastic week. Have a productive week. Have an efficient week. And get shit done. Thank you. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Worton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollyworton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Worton. That's patreon.com/Holly Worton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.